So in episode 2, when the ship arrived, Alina and Maul were knocked out. Maul was taken to the infirmary, and Alina was healed with a broken collarbone, but then told she needs to head to see General Kurgan. And when she gets to his tent, he asks, "What are you?" And she answers, "I'm a cartographer." That wasn't exactly the answer that he was expecting to hear. Everybody thinks that she's concealing something. And it's not like she's lying, she legitimately had no idea that she was Grisha. Because when you're a child, you're supposed to take a test to figure out if you're Grisha or you're going to be something else in the world. But when it came time for Alina and Maul to take the test, they hid. Kurgan, however, has no idea about this, he just thinks she's lying. So he decides to administer a test right there on the spot. And to administer a test, you have to prick somebody in the arm. And when he does that, a bolt of light shines up out of Alina. Now on the outside of this tent, Maul was trying to get to her because he didn't believe she was Grisha. And he was worried what they would do to her once they found out that she was nothing more than a cartographer. But he stopped dead in his tracks when he saw the beam of light shine up. And he knew, holy crap, my best friend is Grisha. Alina, however, is praying to God this is a bad dream and it's not a big deal, but it is. Kurgan has ordered Alina to be escorted to the palace in order to ensure her safety. But Alina doesn't want to go. She doesn't think she's important. She doesn't think this is a big deal. More importantly, she doesn't want to leave her friend. The guard that's to escort her has to explain to her that pretty soon, everybody around is going to know what happened in the fold. And when that happens, they're going to start coming for her. So they need to get her to the palace ASAP. He then puts her in the carriage. She doesn't really have a choice. And as the carriage is leaving, Maul sees it, races after it, but he's too slow. And she's pretty miserable, but the two Grisha that she's with are extremely nice because of the fact they're kind of honored to be in her presence. They look at her sort of like a savior. The Grisha have always had a bad rap because it was their kind who created the fold. But Alina, being a sun summoner, is a Grisha who can destroy it. Somehow this turns into a pissing contest about who has life harder, with Alina saying that when you look different, everybody wants to pick a fight. And the Grisha that she's with says, "Why do you think the palace walls are so big?" It's because being a Grisha used to be a death sentence. But now with General Kurgan, we're looked at as powerful. The carriage is then stopped because there's a roadblock, and Alina is instructed to stay in the carriage. But when the rest of her escort get out to see what's going on, they're ambushed. They're trying their best to thwart off the enemy, but they're getting picked off one by one. And it doesn't take long for Alina to be dragged out of that carriage by a guy who just thinks that she's a witch. He doesn't realize what she actually is. And she's only saved when General Kurgan shows up out of nowhere, creating a dagger out of smoke and cutting the guy in half right in front of Alina. At this point, Kurgan knows he can't take any more chances with her. He's going to have to escort her to the palace himself. They do ride away from the danger, but then take a little bit of a break, and Kurgan explains who attacked them. It's a group of people that are trained to kidnap Grisha. She still doesn't trust him, though. And the whole watching him slice a guy in half didn't really sway her opinion. But he says, "Would you rather had I cut him with a sword?" Which is a pretty fair point. He does explain that that kind of power is only something that a summoner can do. Worth noting that that is something that she is. And he would only use it in extreme circumstances like an ambush. She makes mention that this group of people must be pretty scared of him, but he says no. In fact, they're actually scared of you. It's all because of what your power means to our kind. He starts talking about how she can destroy the fold with proper training, but she cuts him off and says, "I'm not interested in that." She asks him, "Why don't you do it?" And he's pretty surprised and says, "You don't think I've tried? When I enter the fold, I'm a beacon for the Volcra. The only thing I can do is make it worse." She then asks him if it's possible to transfer her power to somebody else, and he can't believe she'd be willing to give up her, quote, gift. But she looks at him like he has 8 heads and says, "Gift? You dragged me away from my only friend. And according to you, I'm going to be a target for the rest of my life? And that's a gift? You want to know why you've never found anybody with this power before? Maybe it's because they don't want to be found." He then tries to calm her down by telling her, "You are Grisha, but you are not alone." They then travel the rest of the way to the palace, but when they arrive, she asks, "Am I a prisoner?" And he says, "All of Ravka is until you and I get rid of the fold." The guards are then instructed to escort her to this beautiful suite. It's a suite that she probably never dreamed she would ever be in. The problem is she's in it as a prisoner and she knows that, and she breaks down crying. She starts rummaging through some of the drawers to find something to protect herself with and does find a letter opener, but that bed is the farthest place from where she wants to be. And where she wants to be is with Maul, who is very, very worried about her, especially when one of the soldiers comes back from the ambush and says that she's now with Kurgan. He thinks that they need to go after her and even goes to his general to try to get a group to make sure that she's safe. But because of the fact that she's Grisha, the general doesn't really care. So Maul decides that night that he's going to go himself, but he gets stopped by 2 friends who ask him, "What the hell are you doing? I mean, what do you actually think's going to happen here? You're just going to walk up to the palace and knock on the door? They're never going to let you in. The only way to get in is to win a medal." She's with the Black General. There's no safer place she could be. They are able to talk some sense into Maul, and he does stay reluctantly. Now, fast forward 2 weeks later, where we pick up with Kaz. He's now working on borrowed time to find a way through the fold. He doesn't want to let Pekka Rollins win this job. And Inej says, it was one thing when we had a week to find a way across, but a few hours? We got to give this up. That's a non-starter for him, though. And she says, we can't go. And what she means by that is she can't go, because she is still in debt to the menagerie. He promises that he has a plan. She doesn't believe it because she's worked with him long enough to know when he's actually got something or he's lying to himself. It gets to the point where he screams at her, maybe you just stay here. And that's when Inej just does her little disappearing routine. A short time later, he hears something enter his office and he figures it's Inej, but it's not. It's Pekka's guys. And Pekka's guys grab Kaz, make him get on his knees, and Pekka gives him an ultimatum. The first is he could do nothing. He walks away from the job. Pekka tells Dreesen that he's taking over for him. And at that point, he figures we're even. The other option is he's going to kill him. And to Pekka, it seems like a no-brainer, so he gets up to leave. But Kaz asks him, have we ever made a deal before? And Pekka says no. Otherwise, you would know better. Or you'd be dead. He then walks out of his office. And there's a reason for that question. Because Inej met up with Jesper and mentions how Kaz is obsessed with taking down Pekka. She's convinced that Kaz wants revenge for something. She then, though, is approached by a man who hands her an envelope with a symbol on it. And it's the symbol for the menagerie. It's the same symbol that's tattooed on her body. And shortly after she leaves, that's when Kaz comes downstairs, having just missed her. He lets Jesper know that he's been warned off the job by Pekka. And Jesper asks him, did he remember you? And Kaz says, well, if he did, I'd be dead. But even though Kaz was warned off the job, he's not willing to give up on the job. And he starts looking throughout his club, and he finds somebody who he thinks can help him. It's this woman who's counting money. So he has one of his security guards grab her and take her to his office, where he asks her, where did you come from? And she says, West Ravka. But that's not how West Ravkans count money. They also don't refer to West Ravka as West Ravka. He figures that she's hiding, which means she found a way through the fold. So he asks, how did you do it? She lets him know that they paid somebody who goes by the title of the Conductor, and he blindfolded them so they don't know how he did it. She doesn't know anything about him, but she does say after they arrived, a stage performer named Poppy took them in for a few nights. And Kaz knows Poppy, although they have a little bit of a history, and not a good one. So he grabs Jesper and they head off to have a meeting with Poppy. The problem is, Poppy's place is on Pekka Rollins' turf. He needs Jesper to create a distraction so he can slip in there. Jesper does that, but when Kaz gets in there, Poppy isn't exactly thrilled to see him. Cooler heads end up prevailing though, and he does ask her, I need to find somebody named the Conductor. And it's obvious by his reaction that Poppy knows who the Conductor is. But while he knows the Conductor, he also knows why Kaz needs the Conductor. It's for that $1 million job. He warns him that he's never going to make enough money to compete with Pekka Rollins. He's a king, and he refers to Kaz as the bastard of the barrel. Kaz then notices a business card from the menagerie and asks Poppy, did Tanti write you? And he says, yeah, actually she was asking about the Conductor too, so I warned him to stay clear. And Kaz looks at him and says, you idiot. She probably had your messenger followed. That was all part of her plan. And indeed, it was. Because when Inej got summoned to meet with Tanti, Tanti gives her the address of the Conductor, although Inej doesn't know this. Tanti tells her that it's someone who's selling to her rival, and if Inej kills him, she will set her free. Killing is against Inej's principles, but freedom is freedom. So Kaz needs to head over to the Conductor's place immediately before he finds him dead. And he's pretty lucky that Inej wanted to have a conversation with the Conductor before killing him. Because she ties him up and then starts looking for records of children that he might have sold to brothels. But he says, I've never sold any children to any brothels. And that's when she shows him her tattoo and says, well, you sold people to Tanti. But he pleads his ignorance, saying that he's nothing more than a smuggler. He screams that he liberates families during the war. She puts a knife at his throat and he asks, well, who are you looking for? And she tells him that she's looking for her brother. He was 12 and she was 14 when 4 men took them from their parents' wagon and separated them. She showed up at Ketterdam on a merchant ship and she has no idea where her brother went. So with a knife at his throat, he says, well, tell me what I can do to help. So she gives him a description of the guy who took her. One had a silver tooth and he went by the name Gregor or Griggs, something like that. Unfortunately for her, the Conductor claims that he doesn't run in those kind of circles. She's probably looking for like a longshoreman. People that take side money from Tanti. With no more information to extract, she's about to get her freedom by killing him. And that's when Kaz shows up and explains that he's worth more to them alive than dead. She can't believe what she's hearing from Kaz and says, you would choose him over my freedom? But he says, you're assuming that it's one or the other. She then takes the knife away from the conductor's throat, and Kaz says, "Conductor, I have a job for you." Although we don't know what the job is. He then heads to the menagerie where he tells Tanti that he's taking Inej. And when they return, he'll have enough money for the buyout. But he knows he needs to offer up some collateral, so what he offers up is the deed to his club. She accepts the offer and they shake hands, but she says to Kaz, "Inej is yours to lose now. It's all yours to lose now." Thanks for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to this channel. Like the video if you liked it. Hit thumbs down if you don't. Be nice in the comments section. Nasty comments hurt my feelings. I work hard on these. If I make a mistake, it happens. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen, it'll be up soon. Sharing is caring. Put it on your MySpace page or your away message. And check out my podcast, Scene Invaders, wherever you listen to podcasts.